So this is a topic I've discussed in other videos, but I thought it'd be good to make a dedicated video on it. In front of the camera I have two samples here. On the left you'll see that these two pieces of cardboard are taped together with a gap in between them. And on the right you'll see these two pieces of cardboard are taped together with ever so slight gap on the edge. And this is something that I see people mess up when they're taping their boxes shut. And it can cause problems depending on how the package is handled. So when you leave a gap like this between your flaps on your box, it gives the seam a chance to kind of wiggle around and shift. And if it does that enough, and depending on how the box is handled and the strength of your tape's adhesive, your package could end up coming open. And just kind of gently wiggling this right now like this isn't doing much, but you don't really know or can't really predict what kind of forces are going to be exerted on the package when it's getting bounced around the conveyor belts and thrown off the truck. So I will just kind of wiggle this around more aggressively. And these have both been kind of sitting for a bit, so the tape's had a chance to bond. But the more everything kind of shifts around in shipping, the higher the odds are that the tape's going to lose its bond on the package. So you can see where some of the tape has come loose. And that's just from me kind of shifting and twisting this around, pushing in and out. Odds are when something's shipped, your package is going to get hit from the sides, so it's going to kind of compress inward. And then there's other times maybe the package might get tweaked a little because of it being picked up, or maybe some other forces that are being put on it that causes it to shift. So it is possible to tape a box with a bad seam like this and have nothing go wrong. But what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for failure by creating this weak point where the box is going to try to wiggle itself free. There are situations where you're not going to get a perfect seam like this. I find it particularly troubling when you're shipping something in a double wall box and you really have to try to force those seams together. Or maybe you put something inside the box that exceeds the internal dimensions of the box. So it's not guaranteed that you're always going to get this kind of a nice seam, but when possible you want to avoid having this gap, or if you are going to have a gap, hopefully the box will be in tension so it's already pulling out significantly with some force, so if it does get bumped it's not as likely to push itself inwards. And on this example where the seam's taped tightly and there's minimal gap, I mean there's a tiny bit of gap there, but you're not going to get it perfect. It's just not feasible. But as you can see, there's no way for this to shift around like this one. I mean this one, it takes me minimal effort because the only strength you have is this line of tape here. Versus here, when you have the flaps taped flushly up against each other, you're not just getting the strength of the tape, but the cardboard flaps are making contact with each other. So they're not going to be as likely to compress, and the tape's going to prevent it from splitting apart. And if you're like me and you use cheaper tape, one thing I can also do to kind of mitigate the risks of the box coming apart is on most boxes I'll go over the seam twice. On higher value or heavier boxes, I'll go over the seam twice, but then I'll go along the outside of the tape and kind of overlap half of it and tape over it. But it's especially important to make sure that when you're taping boxes that you get this seam of the flaps as tight together as possible, because given enough time with enough shifting and bouncing around, it is potentially possible for your tape to break loose and your box get opened and shipping. And I have had it happen before on me on stuff that I purchased And that's kind of part of the reason why I've thought about, well, why does this happen? What's caused this to happen? And the only thing I can come up with is it's the gap. Tape quality does play a factor in this, but I've been using just the basic cheapest tape I can get. It's not garbage tape. It's not like single ply toilet paper at the gas station, but it's not the, $5 a roll Scotch tape that you can buy like at the stores that'll rip your skin off if you even touch it. So yeah, definitely a thing to keep in mind when you're taping your boxes. You want to make sure your seams are taped nice and flat. Another thing, which I'm not going to be able to do a good example of without another piece of tape, but when you're taping your boxes, you don't want like nasty creases and stuff. So like if you put the tape down and you get like some weird creases and stuff, that's not going to hold up very well. You want to make sure your tape is nice and flat and smooth. So simply, squish your box together any way you can. And then when you roll your tape over it, make sure it's perfectly flat over there. That way you're getting the maximum amount of contact area. So yeah, hopefully that'll help you with preventing any unwanted damage or losses when packaging stuff. It's definitely something I've seen on the receiving end of packages where people will let that gap be a thing. It's not quite as big of an issue if you're using fiberglass reinforced paper tape that uses a water-based, or it's either water-based or water activated. I don't know what the proper way to say it is, but if you're using a fiberglass reinforced paper tape, then this gap's going to be a little bit less of an issue, because the difference is with the plastic tape, you're relying on the adhesive bond to the paper, versus with the paper tape, it's like a wood, kind of like using wood glue on a woodworking project. You're bonding the fibers in the paper tape to the fibers on your box. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching.